I will tell you a story about Ukrainian media and how they survived these war times and what will be going on, I believe, in the nearest future with our media. So actually, I would start with a thesis that you have always prepared yourself to a war, but you can never be ready, actually. And at the same time, we, as a Lviv Media Forum team, we were aware that to have some plan is much better than to have none. That's why we gathered in mid of January and developed an emergency plan. Nobody knew what the war with Russia would look like, and we neither. But actually, we assumed the worst scenario, which actually became true. And we, as a team working in a quite a large city, but very close to the EU borders, 80 kilometers or so, we assumed that Lviv will become a hub for media professionals from all over Ukraine, also for those people who would be fleeing the war-affected zones. So we decided to consider this and to develop a media emergency support program. We were aware that we will be able to support Ukrainian media professionals at least for some time, staying in Lviv. So I remember early in the morning on the 24th of February, my colleague who works as a communication manager just called me and said, "Olga, it has begun." So we just started our plan. And you can see here my WhatsApp messages to our donors. You don't find some specific questions there because we just discussed with them what to do in advance. So I just informed them that we start our emergency support plan. Actually, why we did it? We wanted to avoid informational blackout across Ukraine because we were aware that it's also a target for Russian soldiers to kill Ukrainian media professionals and to be an obstacle for them to work and to cover what's going on. So you see on the screen the scope of our media emergency support program. What we did was everything we were asked of, from a shelter at our office in Lviv to some evacuation assistance and providing a working place, to some financial support and advisory support to media across Ukraine. By now, we helped more than 200 media in Ukraine to survive and provided them with different kinds of help. We also took care about the personal protective equipment because Ukrainian journalists weren't prepared to this war. Here you can find the numbers of the equipment we provided, and you see that 88% of equipment got journalists from the regions which are very close to the front line. Actually, this is what we were doing during this 9 months and what we will be doing in the nearest future. This experience of my team gives me opportunity to talk about the lessons we learned during this time, and also to have some insights of what will be the future of the Ukrainian media. Actually, my first point I want to share with you that reputation is gold. For sure, for many of you, this idea is very obvious. Yes, media in Western Europe work considering their reputation, but for real, in Ukraine, it was maybe the first time in the history, at least a history I remember, when reputation really made an opportunity to media to survive and made a difference between independent quality media and those who worked supporting oligarchs and supporting government. Many media outlets, especially those working in the regions, who were funded by local authorities, who were supported by local oligarchs, they just died, and that what changed our media market a lot. On the contrary, those who worked due to the standards, they gained on support, and my colleagues sitting here from the Kyiv Independent or the Ukrainians media, I think they also could easily prove this. My second insight is that investment in security for media is a must. First, digital security is a vulnerable issue for all of journalists and media. The media websites and personal profiles were heavily attacked by the Russian forces, and every time it takes much effort, much money and human resources to restore them. That's why Ukrainian media have changed their security protocols, and I believe the situation got much better right now. On the other hand, we have also an issue with so-called tech giants. These are companies like Meta or Google, because, for example, as appeared, they didn't have any protocols to work with the countries at war. So any news content which includes some cruel pictures is blocked. That's why many Ukrainian media outlets are very limited in publishing and disseminating their content in social media. At the same time, for example, Google sees many Ukrainian regions as Russian-speaking, and they somehow limit the dissemination of the Ukrainian-speaking content in those regions. That's why Ukrainian media outlets working there, they get into a situation where they are forced to produce Russian-speaking content, and also the audiences are under much more impact of the Russian-speaking content, and that also means that they are under a risk of having much more disinformation and propaganda in their informational spaces. It's something that we have to consider. Also, physical security is a matter. The first days of the Russian invasion showed that Ukrainian journalist is a target for a Russian soldier of the same importance as Ukrainian soldiers are. So Russian forces hit TV towers, they captured journalists, tortured them. That's why like they wanted to turn the occupied territories into unused deserts. This brings us to the situation when Russian war crimes would be hidden from the audiences. And these, like both challenges, were very important for Ukrainian journalists to stay alive, but also to continue documenting Russian war crimes. And they took responsibility by themselves to tackle those issues. By now, 43 journalists were killed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Generally, journalists have to make a hard choice at the war. They are civilians that have to decide whether to go to the front line. They are also carrying family members that should evacuate their children or elderly parents from the war-affected zones, but they are also professionals who work for the sake of their audiences. This actually puts a huge pressure on journalists, and some of them even don't consider this issue. Around 1/3 of the media professionals are aware of their need to get psychological assistance. I believe the rest of them they are not aware of what's going on in their mind. So our third lesson is that cooperation is the only way to survive the war challenges. Actually, from my personal experience, the war also became a time when people became much closer to each other and communication became much easier. Actually, I got dozens of messages from people I even didn't know about how could they help me, yes, and how could they support what we do. So it's a huge difference with the times before the war, and it's very impactful in this situation. So I also was witnessing, and I am witnessing, dozens of cases when media support each other, and this helps them to survive. For example, media cooperate, like sharing the spaces equipped by Starlinks and electricity stuff to survive this winter and to continue working. They also share their cars, their materials from the front lines, just to for example, to go and to cover the events very close to the front line or liberated territories, because each of them is feeling lack of resources. Actually, these cases of cooperation is something very valuable that changed the Ukrainian media market. This also helped media to come closer with their audiences, because audiences really matter, and this is what media faced during the war. Actually, readers' revenue started to be one of the key income sources for many media, and I believe this will be a basis for many media to build their financial system, their financial basis for the future. So for sure, Ukrainian media will have to rethink what will be their future in new circumstances. That's why, actually, Anna Babinets from Slidstvo Info also shared with us her thoughts about how the war became an opportunity to come closer with their audience in this situation. Actually, as a result, we have now a newborn media market because the war is a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity for those who are flexible. So, as I mentioned already, there are many media who died, and these were mostly media who didn't care about professional standards. At the same time, media were forced to be flexible and to rethink their models of audience engagement, of fundraising, and so on. And it's something that brings us to need to support those media in their new role. It's like our colleague Anastasia Rudenko from Rubrika Media. It's a solution journalist media. She also supports this idea that actually the war brought us also many new opportunities, not only the challenges. And it's something that it's also a good starting point for building a new media market. Actually, for the end of my speech, I wanted to say that Ukrainian journalists learned many lessons during this wartime, and that's what makes them great partners to cooperate with. That also what makes them more visible on the international scale. That's why I encourage you to also to learn from Ukrainian journalists, because in this situation they have many stories to tell. If you also want to support Ukrainian journalists, you know where to find me, and I encourage you to do this.
Thank you very much, Olga. You can maybe join me here. As we are trying to change the setup, is there a question? Tell us. We'll tell you about the Maria. I'm sorry, I didn't see anything. Question? Oh, yeah. Sue, I'm just going to pass you the microphone, okay?
Thank you. Hi, Olga. Thank you so much. How do you see the longer term? I mean, the war's been long already, but to keep morale up, to continue to support journalists, to encourage them to take a real break, which is often very difficult for a journalist to step away from their work. How are you working in that space, and how do you see the longer term?
Actually, we invest much effort, time, and money into helping journalism to cope with psychological issues. That's why we, for example, organize residency programs for journalists. More than 120 journalists were participating in our programs because we believe the investment in psychological resilience matters. On the other hand, I think that our role is just to accompany media outlets on their way to the new standards and supporting them, like providing them more advisory support and, you know, with a look from the outside to bring them together with their colleagues that have similar experiences so that they could learn from them, but also be a source of information for other people. Like, I think that in the future, Ukrainian media will be much more like quality oriented, and much more cooperation oriented, especially on the scale of international cooperation.
Okay, one last question. Oh, Tina, okay, sorry. I forgot I'm there.
You said that you guys prepared for the worst case scenario from the outset, and I wondered whether you had trouble convincing others to do that, or whether, and it seems like there was a lot of skepticism probably around it, so were your donors really surprised that you guys had been right? Was it difficult to convince other people to join you with preparing for the worst case scenario, which ended up being the right decision?
Yeah, actually, I had many talks to my colleagues from outside the organizations that let's guys be prepared. For sure I felt this skepticism and what even our donors told me, okay, Olga, I don't believe this will be a case, but still let's do it, yes. I only regret the thing that I couldn't convince my colleagues from other media support organizations to somehow develop a joint guideline for emergency guideline and to share the fields of responsibility, but still, like, we managed to do it already after the 24th of February. But you know, risk management and planning is something that we practice, and it's also something that we encourage our media outlets we help to also to practice, because it's something that doesn't make you ready, but makes you prepared.
Thank you very much. One more time.